We'll give it a few more minutes before we start. We have another commissioner who we expect to be here shortly.
Good to see you. Why did you get all the recusals tonight? Michael and I.
Okay, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. We've got everybody who we expect to arrive. Roll call.
Commissioner Barnes.
Present.
Commissioner Chomsky.
Present.
Commissioner Jamando.
Present.
Commissioner McCroskey.
Present.
Commissioner Peng.
Present.
Chair Vigil McClanahan.
Present.
Commissioner Von Nightingale is absent.
Somehow turn myself off again. All right, I will read the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lujan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. Okay. Now we'll move on to public comment for anything that is not on the agenda tonight. Is everybody here for agenda items? Like it, okay. Is there anybody online who would like to make a public comment?
Please use the raise your hand feature if you'd like to speak on an item not on the agenda. Not seeing any hands raised.
All right. In that case, we will go on to the presentation of monthly police data on collisions and citations.
So tonight presenting for the month of May. And there were 0 pedestrian-involved collisions reported for the month. There were 2 bicycle-involved collisions. There were 11 total vehicle collisions, 6 of which were injury collisions. 15 citations were issued, and 1 DUI arrest was made. That concludes the presentation.
All right. Let's go ahead and looks like we only have minutes for last month. Oh, does anybody have any questions about the citation statistics? Public comment. Sorry. It's been a while.
No hands raised online.
Okay. All right. Then we will move on to the minutes.
Comments?
I'll move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Commissioner Barnes,
Aye.
Commissioner Chomsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Javindal,
Aye.
Commissioner McCroskey,
Yes.
Commissioner Peng, Chair V. Hill McClanahan.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. And, all right, so we will move on to item 5.1 for discussion. Proposed traffic calming on Santa Fe Avenue.
Thank you, Chair. I will briefly walk through the order of operations for tonight's discussion here and then hand it over to Ben to give some background on this. So this is a full Santa Fe Avenue corridor. We have several commissioners that live near the corridor, so we're going to take this discussion in 2 parts to avoid conflicts of interest. So rather to avoid repeating ourselves, we'll give the background presentation. That's just the context for this to the full commission, and then we'll take the discussion of the actual design proposals in 2 parts, and so that commissioners that are near those segments of the corridor can recuse for that discussion. And so there will be 2 rounds of presentation of design, questions, public comment, discussion, and potential action. And with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague Ben.
All right. So tonight we are talking about the Santa Fe Avenue traffic calming project, and I'm just going to give a little bit of a background before I hand it off to our consultant team who worked on the design for the project. So a little bit about the background, next slide, and going into the process. So City of Albany has a traffic calming policy that details the process for residents to petition the traffic calming measures on their block. And establishes a criteria by which the city evaluates these requests. This particular request was, the focus was along an entire corridor versus just a street segment or block. So we looked at it from a more comprehensive approach. Next slide. So this is a little bit of the process of the traffic calming policy. It starts with a resident request and then moves all the way to Transportation Commission design review, step 6, where we are now, and finally implementation. Next slide. In 2021, the policy was updated. It was initially based on speeds over the 85th percentile, and if those speeds, if there were the 85th percentile of vehicles was over 5 miles per hour over the speed limit, then the street segment or street was eligible for speed treatments. That policy was changed in 2021, where we just look now at total number of vehicles going over the speed limit, and we prioritize based on the number of vehicles after a traffic count. Next slide. Just quick kind of other background piece here is that in April 2023, the Transportation Commission made a recommendation of creating a conceptual plan for the intersection of Santa Fe and Key Route, and recommended that this intersection and those designs be incorporated into future projects. Getting into a little bit of the analysis of the work that was done. Next slide, where there was a resident request for traffic surveys along 4 segments of Santa Fe, the 500 block, the 700 block, the 900 block, and the 1100 block. And in 2022, traffic surveys were conducted on all 4 of these segments per the request of residents. Next slide. So as you can see here, this is a list of the projects surveyed in 2022. There were 23 in total. We've got the top 8 here. So top meaning that there were, this is organized by number of vehicles traveling over the speed limit, so above 25 miles per hour in this case. And as you can see, next slide, Santa Fe, these 4 blocks of Santa Fe ranked 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th on this list based on this new metric that was established in 2021. Next slide. Here's a map of all of the places that were made it to the top 8. You can see the Santa Fe Corridor on the right. There were the other 3 highlighted street segments or blocks were recommended for traffic calming in March of 2024. And there's one street segment on Pierce Street towards the Albany State Marine Reserve that was not recommended for traffic calming because it's on a bus route. And next slide shows just kind of a table of that, so showing the status if you see on the right-hand column. So we recommended 3 of these blocks for traffic calming in March. 4 of them are under consideration tonight, and that 500 Pierce was excluded due to it being on a bus route. Next slide. So just kind of looking at collision history on the street, this is coming from the Local Road Safety Plan from 2023 that was developed by the city. This is a map of the EPDO score, or the Equivalent Property Damage Only score. And importantly, this is just kind of a rating. Basically, it weights different crashes depending on severity. And so if you'll see here, Santa Fe from essentially Solano on down to the city limit is one of the highest scores for the severe crashes. throughout the city. Next slide shows just the high injury network map, which is just total number of injuries along a corridor. And the same segment of Santa Fe is also highlighted here. It is one of the, I believe, the fourth highest, if we go to the next slide, in terms of crashes and in terms of the EPDO score. So meaning that it has the most, it's the fourth most dangerous corridor in the city. Next slide just highlights that. So that's a little bit of the analysis. Now on to what we did in terms of public input. Next slide, we had an open house at the Albany Community Center on June 4th at 5 p.m. About 40 residents attended the open house, and we flyered the Santa Fe Corridor to invite residents. There were just a little bit of what happened there. The feedback we heard was, one, there was kind of a question of why Santa Fe was a collector street or considered a collector street. There was general support for the proposed safety improvements along the corridor. There was general support for many traffic circles where they were recommended at intersections. There was some concern about Francis Street and where it intersects with Santa Fe Avenue and the kind of safety of that intersection. There were concerns about the intersection of Solano and Marin. The street segment between Solano and Marin and folks speeding to make the light. And there were concerns about the Santa Fe and Marin intersection and the safety of school children there. And there was a general suggestion or conversation about adding a pedestrian scramble at that intersection as a result. There were also some recommendations to increase the number of speed humps or tables along the street, particularly on the 500, 1000, and 1100 block. There was a recommendation to add a crosswalk at Santa Fe and Key Route. There was enthusiasm for adding landscaping or planters in the traffic circles that were being proposed. And there was some concern about parking loss that was being proposed at Santa Fe and Key Route. That is kind of a recap of the open house. We also put out a feedback survey on the same date of June 4th. Next slide, please. And it was open between June 4th and 14th. And there were 60 responses to this survey. So just a couple of key highlights here. The folks who responded, almost all of them drove and walked the street, with about half using it to cycle. Next slide. There were kind of three overarching concerns with the safety of the street. One was the high speed of motor vehicles. Two was the poor compliance at intersections with stop signs. And three was the need for improved pedestrian crossings. Next slide. And then there was more support for many traffic circles versus the other treatments being proposed for the intersections north of Solano along the street. Other feedback that we heard generally was that cyclists don't feel safe along Santa Fe, that speed humps and tables were considered the most effective way to calm traffic. There was a desire for improved lighting along the street, particularly at key intersections. There was concern about speeding coming from El Cerrito into the city from the north. There was a concern about the safety of school children at the intersection of Santa Fe and Marin. And there was concern about visibility at intersections and a proposal for daylighting at the intersections. So that was a little bit of a recap of the feedback that we received through the public survey. And so just moving on to the next steps from here. So the transportation commissioners are have reviewed the designs and will continue to tonight as they're presented by the consultant. And they'll recommend to staff how to proceed. Once recommended, staff will coordinate with block representatives to obtain petition signatures in support of the designs, which will require 2/3 of support along the entire corridor. And once approved by residents, the project will be added to the city's capital projects queue for future funding and implementation. And that is all we have as staff on background, and we're going to hand it over now to the consultant team to walk us through the designs, and we'll deal with the recusals before that.
So we'll start with the southern section from just north of the Marin intersection south. And I'll invite Andrew Lee from Parametrics up.
Can I make a point, Justin?
Yeah.
Some of the audience members might be a little confused about what a recusal is and how we determine it. So could you address that just for 30 seconds?
Yeah, so elected or appointed officials in the city are not allowed to make decisions on things that will affect their own property that they have a financial interest in. So there is public interest law essentially requires recusal if it's within 500 feet of your property, if you're making decisions that might have a financial impact on your property. Within 500 to 1,000 feet, there's a sort of an in-between zone of if it's something that still could impact your property values, you're still supposed to recuse yourself from making those decisions directly. So that's what we're safeguarding here, just having commissioners that don't have a financial stake in the decisions that are before the commission.
And that's a state law.
Thank you.
Hello. Good evening, commissioners and members of the public. My name is Andrew Lee, senior consultant with Parametrics. We're a West Berkeley-based traffic engineering consulting firm. I'm pleased to have been working with the city for a while on traffic calming issues here. To briefly cover our overview of the corridor, I want to highlight the study objectives and goals that were developed in collaboration with city staff. These being to enhance the multimodal traffic circulation and safety, preserve Santa Fe Avenue as a collector facility and connection to Kensington, and maintain effective emergency access. And part of the work that we've performed with city staff included meeting directly with fire and police to discuss some of the proposals. And from this, we developed a toolkit of traffic calming measures that we collectively thought would be effective moving forward and would still maintain these study objectives and goals for the corridor. This map here shows some of the existing traffic control measures that are installed along Santa Fe, these being all-way stop controlled intersections to the north, 2 traffic signals on Solano and Masonic respectively, and then crosswalks that are not stop controlled, but they are what we call, as traffic engineers, uncontrolled or yield controlled crossings. Next slide, please. And covered some of these aspects before. This is a summary of the traffic counts that have been observed along Santa Fe. We averaged it along the entire corridor to roughly 4,600 vehicles per day. The physical condition of the corridor is relatively uniform. There is approximately 40 feet between faces of curb from the east and the west. There's parking on both sides of the street, 2 travel lanes. Amongst the collision records, I want to highlight that we expanded the records that were covered from the local road safety plan to also examine records dating as far back as 2012. And so the map here shows those collisions on the corridor. You could see that in particular between Marin and Solano is a very high-density area for traffic collisions. And then to the south, there are several property damage-only automobile-involved collisions at those intersections. Next slide, please. So for this portion of the presentation, we are covering the proposals in the south section, that being from the city limit, south city limits with Berkeley up to Marin. And so the toolkit that we have developed here is actually fairly consistent with the north section as well. Those common measures being edge lines, which serve to delineate the width of the street, especially where there's existing parking. These edge lines are a psychological feature where narrower lanes as striped tend to have drivers pay a bit more attention from straying outside those lanes. Also helps find the edge of the parking area for people who are parking curbside. And the overall effect is generally slower traffic speeds. The other features I'll highlight, speed humps or speed tables. These are, in this context, a quick build proposal for speed humps. They would be installed as asphalt or speed tables. Speed tables differ from speed humps in that speed humps have a little gap for larger vehicles, particularly emergency access, fire department and ambulance, for them to have their wheel tracks pass through these gaps without having to slow down. Whereas speed tables are a more gentle feature that ramp up slowly, have a flat table, as traffic engineers would call it, and then it transitions back down. They serve effectively the same function. And then, particular to the south section, we have a proposal for mountable islands that serve to inform drivers as they approach intersections that there is an intersection. Many times with residential collector streets where there is dense on-street parking, it can be hard to see that there's an intersection approaching just from the way vehicles are parked with mature street trees and whatnot. And so these mountable islands, for one, they are diverting drivers by alerting them that there's a upcoming feature, while at the same time, for large vehicles like moving trucks, heavy deliveries if they occur, and also fire and waste, that these are intended to be traversable when absolutely necessary, say in emergency access conditions. Next slide, please. So in this exhibit, I'm going to be walking through where each of these proposals would be taking place. The yellow box that I have shown here, that is a proposal to install either a speed hump or a speed table. It would be one or the other. It would not be both. And then these red boxes here, I'm showing these are the proposed locations for the mountable speed islands. And so in the south section here, from Key Route to north of Ramona, there are proposals for 2 speed tables or speed humps. There is one existing north of Ramona, 3 proposals for the islands, and they are intended to be complementary to the existing islands that have already been installed at Pomona and Ramona. So the existing traffic diverting features would not be removed or replaced. They would remain in place. With the mountable island, they are intended to provide advance notice for people approaching the intersection. Along with that, there is the prior proposal for a intersection modification at Key Route Boulevard that was presented at an earlier commission meeting. And then with that, I'll move it over to the next slide. This is the remainder of Santa Fe from Ramona up to Marin Avenue. There is an existing speed hump as shown in the dashed black. And then particular to Marin Avenue, there is a consideration that we've put forward, which is that with the Marin Elementary School being on the southeast corner, that during heavy traffic times, especially when there are school children present, we are presenting to the commission that a pedestrian-only crossing phase may be something that would improve the traffic safety while removing some intermodal conflicts, particularly between people driving and people walking. Next slide, please. This is a summary of the proposals for this section from Key Route up to Marin. This includes the quick build project as indicated in the green star, the 2 new speed humps or speed tables, 3 mountable islands. Edge lines are not indicated on the exhibit. They would be installed for the entirety of this portion of the corridor. And the one thing that I did not cover is that there is a set aside for a speed feedback sign if so desired. Location to be determined, but somewhere where, for instance, at the 500, or no, this is the south end, 1100 block, where speeds are high, such a installation could be installed. We've generated a planning level cost estimate that comes out to north of $100,000, including a 30% contingency. And with that, I will turn it over back to staff.
Open it up for questions. Though, actually, one note, just because there were a couple of changes in the design we're presenting tonight for that key route and Santa Fe intersection from what was presented per the commission direction. So maybe we should just highlight that for a moment. So there were, my recollection were 2 additional things from the commission discussion. One was the crosswalk location being adjusted more in line with the sidewalk crossing that's reflected here. And there was some discussion at that time regarding curbside parking loss, and we did hear feedback at the open house regarding that. So the design we're showing here returns 2 of those curbside spots along the southern end of Key Route while maintaining the crosswalk alignment there and the intersection visibility. So those are the 2 tweaks since the commission last saw that design. There was also, Ben is reminding me, that at that discussion there was a quicker and a longer term, sort of 2 permutations that were presented to the commission. This is reflecting the quicker striping and bollard kind of version of it. It does identify in it the desired future location for an additional crossing location, but that was in the concrete work, more involved, longer term portion that we've kept out of this to make this a viable, quick build set of installations.
Okay,
That will open it up to questions.
Commissioners?
Have we arranged grant funding for this $100,000 yet? Do we know where the money's coming from?
The traffic calming program currently comes out of our direct local distribution for transportation, for paving, for bike ped. So that is the identified source in the current capital improvement plan. Once we have a design recommendation, we'll work with Public Works on the funding and delivery approach, but there isn't a grant funding, outside
Okay.
grant funding
So it's
source for
basically,
this.
the issue will be how the council prioritizes the capital improvement plan. Okay. There are, near Marin School on Santa Fe, there is 2 speed obstacles now. What do you call those? The humps, pillows?
Speed humps.
The existing are speed humps. They go up and they come back down. They don't have the flat table.
Flat
in
spot
them.
on. I'm done, thank you.
Somehow I remember the speed humps, or the speed tables are close to like $40,000 each. Do I just remember it wrong, or this time it shows only 5,000? just want to double check. I mean, definitely the consultant knows the detail. Just want to cross check. That's the latest estimate.
It can vary a lot. We've had success in reducing the cost when it's tied to a larger paving project or where a contractor is mobilized. If it's a standalone, it can be much higher. So there is a fair bit of variability. I think the estimate in the past has been higher than just what was presented here as the planning estimate. Partly when we often are talking about these, they're as standalone projects. This would be part of a larger project, so it may be somewhere in between those two numbers.
How are we planning to make the determination between tables and humps for the optional spots?
We are,
Sorry, I'm sitting next to you. I didn't get that.
So there are a number of places here where it says speed table or speed hump, and I'm wondering how we would go about making that determination.
there are some locations where we don't have the desired horizontal distance for a speed table. In conversations with fire department, if we do speed humps along this corridor, they want to see the channels where they could proceed faster. We have had some internal discussions over whether the driveway buffer distances that we generally desire for speed humps, whether that should be the same for speed tables if there's less of an impact on driveways. But we're looking for commission feedback on what we would like to see, but there are going to be some site constraints. There are driveways on both sides throughout the corridor, and so finding suitable locations for speed tables is constrained in some of these.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so we move on to public comment, but do we have anyone who wants to speak on this section of the corridor?
We have at least one speaker card on this segment. Yeah, you want to come on? You don't. We can take it up as people who are ready after that one.
Thank you, commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this, and thanks for all the work that went into this, and thanks to Ben who helped me out with some questions that you know. I want to support this plan in its entirety. I think this corridor needs a lot of attention, but as has been called attention to, I did. Oh, thank you. I wanted to call extra attention to the Key Route and Santa Fe intersection. As we've seen, it's a very busy intersection. It has a lot of collisions. There's very high speeds there, and there's no pedestrian protection, no crosswalk, nothing. The crossing of Key Route, if you were heading across Key Route, it's over 100 feet unprotected, and there's nothing at all there. You know, it is unlike any other intersection on Santa Fe, especially south of Marin. We don't have an island. We don't have a tree in the middle of the street. There is nothing there at all. So I just really wanted to ask the commission to consider doing what they can. I know this is bundled up with a lot of other changes in the corridor now, and the gears of government work slowly, but we are in dire need of that, of really anything. And I saw that a crossing across Santa Fe is proposed as a long-term improvement concept. I just wanted to advocate that that is also moved up. If you were on this little spit of land here between Key Route and Santa Fe, you would have to backtrack over 500 feet to get to a crosswalk. And when we don't provide convenient options, people are going to take dangerous behaviors. And the speeds on here are very fast, and people cross that, you know, essentially jaywalking. They have no protection whatsoever. So thank you again. I appreciate the time to talk. Thanks.
Thank you. Just take it right to left, or left to right. Whoever's next. You go first.
Do I give you my card? I don't know how this works. Sure. This is from the agenda item on this, but it's for the same issue that was brought up about Key Route and Santa Fe intersection. And I was wondering, there's already a triangle in that intersection. And would it be possible to make that triangle an island and then have two crosswalks coming across instead of what is currently proposed, one crosswalk leading to, I guess it's an island that you gave parking back to. Thank you very much for that. But I have a question about that design. I mean, the car can go one direction. When it wants to come out, it needs to back up. What's behind that space is a driveway. Now, if anybody parked too far across that driveway, then that would block that car. And so I'm wondering if that section can just be opened up completely and given back both of those spaces, and the middle space, which is now used for parking also, could still be used and available for a crosswalk.
We can't answer questions, but we can address it after your comment's over.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Margarita Kloss. I live on Key Route, 1129 Key Route. So I'm right at the intersection.
Excuse me, could you step closer to the microphone, please?
You'll bend down.
What? Bend it down?
There you go.
Okay. Is that better? Okay.
Start again.
My name's Margarita Kloss. I live at 1129 Key Route, which is right near the intersection with Santa Fe. I wanted to find out if if all of the emergency response vehicles will be able to get through the new design. I would like to request that the final design try to maintain as much parking as possible. It looks as though it might be possible just to reduce the parking by 4 spaces, which would be great because the neighborhood has a lot of pressure for parking. Thanks for including the second crosswalk, which goes across Santa Fe. It might be an idea to push it closer to the corner of Santa Fe and Key Route because it's going to, it means that there's going to be less parking that's taken out of use. I didn't see any mention of stop signs. Will there still be stop signs on Key Route? And I would like to advocate that no stop signs on Santa Fe are needed at Key Route. The traffic veins, I don't know what you call them, but I would like to advocate for the bumps instead of something big, so, not curbs, because it can hurt the cars if the cars don't see them. Let's see, and then the plantings in the Key Route intersection. Let me start that over again. In the Key Route, what's being constructed to make Key Route meet Santa Fe at 90 degrees. If there could be some sort of greenery put in there, that would be great. Also, these plans have no maps or legend. The maps have no legends or keys, which makes it very difficult to figure out what's going on. Thank you.
I'm Mimi Chen. I'm on 1100 Santa Fe. I'm going to read this because I took all day to write this. Okay, it's only a page and a half. My goal is to help solve Santa Fe Avenue speeding concerns. Perhaps there is no one solution, so I feel that the selected solutions should be at least not cause other issues in an attempt to reduce speeding. My main concern is where Pomona and Santa Fe intersects, which is where I live. I like to remind Albany that they removed the concrete bump outs, which was in front of my house and other homes, for many years until it was proven to be a hazard to bicycle riders. The new parking space that I received when it was removed was helpful, as it is another parking space for the community and offers some room for my garbage pickup. Now, I am requesting the island and the tree that is located in the middle of Santa Fe and Pomona Street to be removed. Drivers continue to drive too fast. Despite the island, with the island in place, it is even more dangerous. The island is similar to the concrete bump outs, which were removed by Albany because cyclists were hitting the bump outs and getting injured. During the past 10 years while living in this house, cars continue to hit the island, which damage their car or their tire. Some are reported and others are not reported. I would be interested to find out how many times Albany has repaired this island. On June 25th, just the other day, an Albany service worker arrived to fix the latest damaged sign hit by a vehicle. My observations, number one, my proposed option is to install the equipment which measures the car speed and informs the driver, as often we need reminders. But for those drivers who do not care about public safety, I suggest that Albany Police periodically ticket offenders who are speeding at a very high speed, which is not acceptable for any Albany street. Two, the island at Santa Fe and Pomona is a hazard, which has caused unnecessary accidents. I recalled a woman who drove into the island/tree at dusk on a day before Christmas Eve. Was she tired? Was it too dark? Who knows? She was just stunned. Drivers are confused since they do not expect a tree or island to be in the middle of a dark residential street. Islands are normally used for wider streets that have 2 lanes on each side. 3, cars on Pomona make a sharp turn left onto Santa Fe.
I'm sorry, you're out of time. Thank you. Okay, it looks like there were a few online comments.
Melody Reeves, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity and the presentation. I live on the 1100 block of Santa Fe. I was, part of the conversations last year about the intersection of Key Route and Santa Fe, and so I won't dwell too much on that because I know that there has been a lot of work done around that. I will say I really think that speed humps are necessary, and I think that a lot could be done with the proposed edge lines and really just kind of narrowing the perception of the street. I think a lot of the speeding is due to the fact that it is a wide street and there's just not a lot of lane markings. And so people they just drive fast because it's a wide street. So I think a lot could be done in terms of reducing speeds with just pavement markings. And I really think, I will say personally, I really would not like to have a speed bump in front of my house, which is what is being proposed. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to comment. Thanks.
Roberta Fox, go ahead.
Biden should be the person communicating that. Joe Biden is not good at communicating his own record. And in the context of a campaign, right now, his job, number one.
Roberta Fox?
Seems not relevant.
Don't disagree with you. I mean, I think you're right about the decision.
We'll come back to you.
Hello?
Oh,
Hello?
we can hear you. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. My raised hand. Okay, sorry. I'm on the 1100 block of Santa Fe. I'm not happy with your design. I did not hear what the woman were the two parking places. It looks like she has to back into her. Sorry. Back into her parking stall to, I'm not sure, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about her parking arrangement. My other concern is on Key Route where you're having to turn onto Santa Fe. I don't know how the fire department would be able to do that if they had to do that. I guess those are my only issues I was having. I'm not happy with it. I just would be happy with you placing those yellow posts like in the triangle space in Key Route in Santa Fe, and that you would put a crosswalk there. I think that would work a lot better. You would still keep Key Route going straight and then making your right-hand turn onto Santa Fe. But sorry about this. It was my computers were not able to function correctly tonight. But thank you for taking my call.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Hi, my name is Catherine, speaking here as a private resident, not in my capacity as a newly appointed member of the Climate Action Committee. I am an avid walker, bicyclist, and I also do have a car, and my partner does as well, and we want to be able to walk and bike safely here, so I support any needed improvements that the council thinks is necessary to help slow cars down and improve safety for pedestrians and bicyclists, including but not limited to the addition of speed tables or any other bulb outs, intersection modifications, etc. Thank you, that's all.
That's all the hands online.
All right. Discussion?
I wonder, we spent quite a bit of time, I don't know how long it's been, a year, 2 years on that triangle at Key Route in Santa Fe. So I guess for our consultant, one question would be, is there anything in the current plan that would make it wise to revisit Key Route in Santa Fe, or can we just share with the public the decision-making that was made, a year or two ago, which was pretty extensive? Because I'm not sure it's worth it to reinvent the wheel, but most of the comments seem to be about that intersection. Well, I'm curious as to what other people think, but maybe we could share what was already decided before we reinvent the wheel. That would be a possible suggestion.
I hear a lot of comments, especially comparing the existing island between Santa Fe and Romano to what we are going to do, what the consultant is suggesting to do at the Key Route. And Santa Fe. I just want to point out that's different, right? I know it's probably an island to you, but it will function differently because to that commenter about you live in front of Santa Fe and Romano, right? You can see that Ramona, yeah. So when people are on Santa Fe and they're making a right turn to Ramona, or if they're coming south from Ramona turning into Santa Fe, that's a really wide turning radius, which enables the driver to go really fast. And if you can see the new design that the consultant has, where you kind of make the key route intersect with the Santa Fe at the right angle, that disable them to make that quick turn. They'll tremendously reduce the speed, but the consultant can correct me on that. So there's a very big differences.
So one of the paragraphs has to do with if you.
I'm sorry, we can't take comments.
Just
at
want
this
to,
time.
that's additional information, put it out there. I just personally, I think this design is more superior than what we have over there for both intersection between Ramona and Pomona.
Staff, do we have the plan that was talked about earlier, or is this the design here, the plan that was talked about earlier? Is before my time on the commission?
Yeah, the design that was recommended by the commission previously is reflected here. The two changes were the ones I called out. The crosswalk, we had direction from the commission to adjust to align better with the ramp and crossing location. And the second was to look at the parking potential to include some parking back in the design is my recollection. But those are the only two changes since what was presented.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, just wanted to.
If I may, we had a couple of questions about emergency services access. Can staff or consultants speak to that?
Yeah, either of us can. In the lead up to that design, we put cones out and worked through the turns with fire to test it. And part of the idea of starting with paint and delineator posts versus putting in curbs is that we could continue to ensure that emergency vehicles can maneuver as they need before we make any more permanent changes.
And the posts can be flattened as necessary by emergency vehicles during that phase. Great.
And I would just add, as standard practice these days, all designs are vetted with the departments before they're brought to commission.
Do we have any further discussion of this section?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So I just wanted to note that based on what we were just talking about, the quick build has the advantage that if we find out it doesn't work quite the way we expected, it's a great way to test the design before we build in concrete, which is when the option for planting would come up once we've got raised concrete curbs and we can open up the street. With respect to the parking, the question was raised about how easy it is to get in and out of that parking space. And there's kind of two thoughts that I have. The first one is making sure that we're not running afoul of the new state law about no parking within 20 feet of a crosswalk. But the other piece, since this really is kind of offset from where the crosswalk enters the street, so I think it's okay, is that space doesn't necessarily have to be completely parallel to the curb. It could be slightly angled. So maybe a 30-degree angle parking space instead of a parallel parking space would make it a lot easier to get in and out, where when you're backing out, you're not backing out across a driveway towards another parked car, but backing out into the open street.
It just make it a little closer to the crosswalk.
It makes the back end closer to the crosswalk, but
But I agree. I think
something to look at. If we can get it where it's coming out more than 15 feet away, then we're okay because it's technically a bulb out, and that gets us a few more feet to play with. We can't, but just trying to figure out how we can optimize the configuration. I was interested in the comments about people running into the island with the tree. And that's a tough one. I don't want people to crash. Boy, I wish they'd pay attention to where they're going so they don't crash. If we need to add reflectors on there, let's add reflectors, but it's really hard to defend people crashing into something like that because it draws into question, would they be crashing into people instead if we don't have that? You know, so, you know, again, thankfully it's property damage. Hopefully no person injured themselves crashing into the island, but it's not causing them to crash into another person. I think from a Vision Zero perspective,
If you have to choose,
Yeah.
property damage is much preferable to injury damage.
And I wonder if the additional street furniture that's going to be installed on either side will help slow people down before they get to those islands.
Yeah, and again, with reflectors and vertical elements that help it make it more conspicuous, can be seen better, I think those are always desirable things. And the goal is we want people to slow down. We don't want them to feel like they can blast through here. That's the whole point of doing the traffic calming. You know, the occasional person who refuses to slow down and clips their tire on the edge of the curb, well, maybe that'll get them to slow down the next time. I, again, don't want anyone getting hurt, but if it's a minor incident, that's much better than the major incidents we're trying to prevent.
now I'm picturing sparkly reflective statues of people in the median islands. Maybe somebody peeing on the tree or just standing there walking a dog. I don't know. Lighting was brought up in the comments, but I don't believe that the plan addresses lighting at this time. That's kind of a future thing.
Yeah, I mean, this seems to be purely quick build, so I imagine like infrastructure like that would have to come later as a second phase.
Comment. We also did 6 months ago a very extensive lighting analysis of the whole city, so lighting concerns have been addressed, although I don't remember specifically what was planned for these intersections.
Yeah, I mean, I have a note to request an update at a future meeting for the future agenda items section, so. Do we have any feelings that something that looks like a motion, or?
I don't know if we're ready for a motion. I don't think we're considering removing the current chicanes, and I'm in favor of retaining them, as we talked about, property versus personal damage. There's a note on the plans about a possible two-way bikeway in the planting strip for future consideration. I just want to say I'm not in favor of removing planting or trees for such a consideration, as long as it's noted. I'm generally in favor of the plan as laid out, to try. I have some issues with the north end of what we're talking about at Santa Fe and Marin. I've spent a lot of time volunteering at Marin School, especially in front of the school, and been in touch with the sort of patterns on Marin as well. And unfortunately, what happens at drop-off time primarily is that at about quarter of an hour before school start, to about 10 minutes before school start, the parent traffic overtakes the mobility of any traffic in the area, and people start doing stupid things, crazy things to get around or attempt to get around the backup. At the same time, parents start dropping off kids on the opposite side of the street. So it's a bad convergence. A scramble phase was considered when the stoplight was updated in the late aughts, around 2009. I would be interested in having some data about how many families cross two parts of the intersection to get to the school. I'm also worried that if the phases are specifically adjusted on that stoplight for a scramble phase, that not only will Santa Fe crash, but Marin will crash. And actually, you know, all things being considered, I'm not necessarily in favor of you know, saving vehicle throughput. I am more worried about the actions of the people who are delayed and what I've seen happen.
Acting irrationally out of impatience?
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard complaints from fellow parents who have said that, I mean, and I think that they would probably be in favor of the scramble, where you get into this bad situation where you have people like trying to make the turn onto Santa Fe to drop a child off, and then there are people coming along, so you're constantly either you don't have the light or you have the crossing guard keeping you in your place because you can't cross this, because someone is crossing the street. And I wonder if a scramble phase wouldn't help with that, because you wouldn't have the sort of the longer period where you have the crossing guard holding traffic against the lights. But I don't know. I have no data, just sort of anecdotes that I've heard.
I was just going to say that a scramble phase, to be clear what it requires to function safely, is that there's no cars at all moving while the pedestrians are crossing. Mm-hmm. Now, what you give up for that is when the cars are going, in theory, there should be no pedestrians crossing. That's how you balance the demand. It's either cars or pedestrians, and both have to wait. And it's a big paradigm shift from what people are used to. So I think it might be worth considering, but I think it would be something to approach with caution, recognizing that we are, you know, at some point going to have pedestrians who are approaching the intersection thinking, I want to cross, and I'm seeing Santa Fe has the green, so I'm going to walk across Marin along with the cars on Santa Fe. And as a pedestrian, I'm not allowed to do that because that phase is now reserved for all the cars turning as well as the through cars, you know, in a scramble paradigm. You don't have to do it that way, but to avoid the uncontrolled backup, you kind of have to balance the flow through there by saving space for those right turning cars. And so I don't know what's necessarily the right answer, but I think that it's really easy to look at it and say, great, I'm getting a time when there's no cars in the intersection, and forget that that also means as a pedestrian there's a time when I'm excluded from using the intersection. And if we can get everyone to obey both of those rules, not have cars sneak the right turns through there and not have pedestrians sneak through, that's great, but it'll be a big education and enforcement effort to make that happen. Possible, but not one that I think we should just undertake lightly, and maybe goes a little bit beyond the scope of just the traffic calming. So I don't know that I would advocate to implement that right away as part of the quick build, though if there's a convenient way to do a trial without having to rebuild the intersection, might be worth it just to see firsthand whether people can figure it out and follow the rules, and if it turns out they can't, sort of turn it off and go back to the way it was. So in a sense, kind of like a quick build version of a scramble phase as a trial.
Because I have 3 questions. Was this intersection and possibility of changing the lights discussed at the staff level? 1. If we did modify the stoplight pattern, would that change any of the other considerations about speed humps versus pillows or whatever? And 3, I'm not sure we could do this right away because it's summertime. It won't be kids going back to school until the fall, so we'd at least have to hold off that long, or maybe use the interim as a time to safely do the experiment, because there is fewer kids, there are fewer kids around. Those are just, that last one is just a thought. I don't know which way that goes, but those are my concerns.
It seems unlikely that we would get to it until into the school year anyway, but, okay. Anything?
So I guess what I would ask is, what's the goal of the scramble? Is it to separate out movements? And would that be possible in any other way? For example, implementing a left turn phase for vehicles traveling from Santa Fe to Marin. Now, that's not physically possible with the current way that the curbs are at that intersection, at least northbound. But could that achieve a similar separation? And would the timing be different?
I'll kind of jump in with a tentative answer to that, which is with shared lanes such as we have, you could do split phase where first northbound goes and the lefts get to go with no pedestrians in their crosswalk, and then southbound gets to go with the lefts and no pedestrians in that crosswalk. So one crosswalk at a time goes along with the parallel traffic that doesn't cross their left turning crosswalk.
I get what you're saying. So I'm thinking about northbound Santa Fe and the fact that there are actually three movements, left, straight, and right.
Yeah. So your right turn is still going to conflict. It's not great.
Railroad arms that come down.
I hate to ask a dumb
That's where it
question.
becomes a scramble.
Yeah, exactly.
Can we even, was this conversation close enough to what was agendized that we should continue it or not continue it?
It's in the plans to be considered.
Just checking.
Maybe to try to shorten this up, I feel pretty comfortable with the traffic calming quick build items, subject to any small tweaks. But the scramble phase is one I'm a little more concerned about, and which I think could be implemented separately if we wanted more time to talk about it later.
Do we have something approaching a motion? Does anybody want to put something forward?
I'll turn that into a motion. I move that we approve the physical traffic calming devices as presented, and that we reconsider the scramble phase at a future date.
And that, is that a direction to staff to go ahead and do that?
Yes.
I would second that and offer a friendly amendment to prefer speed tables.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Roll call?
Commissioner Barnes?
Aye.
Commissioner Zavendo?
Aye.
Commissioner McCroskey?
Aye.
Commissioner Peng?
Yes.
Chair Vigil McClanahan?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Right. On to section 2.
With that, we'll switch to discussing the northern section of Santa Fe.
So I'm out, right? Who has to leave? Just me?
We're going to switch to the northern section now. All right. So, but we're not, we're not ready for comment yet.
Pull up the slide while we retrieve another commissioner.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, there you are.
We'll reconvene talking about north of Marin Avenue. Bring Andrew back up.
Good evening, commissioners and members of the public again. For this section of the presentation, we are discussing Santa Fe Avenue from north of Marin to the north city limit with Kensington. As presented to you on this slide, this is a quick build traffic calming toolkit that applies to this north section. It has 3 common features with the south section, those being the edge lines, which are intended to slow traffic by narrowing the perceived width of the lane, speed humps or speed tables, which are options within the proposals, which are intended to slow passenger vehicles in particular by introducing a vertical deflection. And then unique to this section is a mini traffic circle with an aesthetic feature. This is a proposal that was identified during the public outreach meetings. There were several other raised features that were reviewed, and the traffic circle with a aesthetic feature was identified as the preferred approach at intersections specifically. I'll note that for mini traffic circles, they are typically applied at locations where there still remains some form of stop control. These are not intended to be like modern roundabouts, which are solely yield control. And the difference is that for vehicles approaching the intersection with a mini traffic circle, they are still required to make a complete stop. Modern roundabouts do not require such a complete stop movement. Next slide, please. So this is the layout of the corridor. Marin Avenue is shown to the far left of this slide. And on the first panel, this is the section between Marin and Solano. It contains 2 proposals for either a speed table or speed hump, as shown with the yellow boxes. This is identified as one of the corridors or sections which experiences a high degree of traffic collisions, including collisions with people on bicycles, one of which resulted in a severe injury. To the north of Solano Avenue intersection, there is a proposal for either a speed hump or speed table, as indicated in the yellow box. And I'll note that this section here is one where the striping already includes a edge line. This section also has an edge line with a dashed feature. The proposal here is that we would maintain the edge line, although for the remainder of the corridor, the dashed feature is not part of the proposal. A highlight here for the intersection at Washington that this is one of the existing all-way stop-controlled intersections, and the addition of a aesthetic traffic circle is intended to alert drivers as they approach the intersection that there is a crossing that they should be aware of. Notice also that the yellow center lines are bowed out in order to direct the driver to move laterally to the right, and the intent of that is to catch their attention so they do not drive through the all-way stop intersection, and also to slow them down as they essentially avoid the feature in the middle of the intersection. This proposal is sized and designed specifically to accommodate emergency vehicles so that they're still able to pass through the intersection. And the intent here is that for large vehicles, they would not be making the movement to the right of the traffic circle, but rather they could just intersect and make a direct left turn in front of the mini traffic circle, or if needed, they could mount the feature in an emergency situation. Next slide, please. For the block shown here, there's one proposal for a speed hump or speed table and on the south section, and then also between the Kensington and Thousand Oaks intersection. And these were noted during the public outreach process and in review of the traffic speeds that traffic calming was particularly needed in this section here. The section between Portland and Thousand Oaks did not rise to the top in terms of requiring a speed hump or speed table. As with the other intersection, Portland and Thousand Oaks also have a proposal as indicated in the blue box of a aesthetic feature with a mini traffic circle. The existing always stop controlled intersection control would be retained. Next slide, please. This corridor map with the yellow indicates the placement of the speed humps or speed tables. The edge lines would be installed for the entirety of the north section of the corridor between Marin and north city limits. And then there are 3 mini traffic circles shown here at each of the existing always stop controlled intersections. And the planning level cost estimate as shown with a contingency is $125,000. Turn it back over to staff.
Open it up for questions.
Questions?
I'm curious what the goal of the mini traffic circle is. Like, what benefits does it offer compared to just a standard 4-way stop sign?
We're looking at some of the feedback and some of the notes during the public outreach meeting. I believe there were some concerns about people ignoring the stop signs and just proceeding straight through. And so having a feature in the middle is intended to catch the attention of the driver as they approach. Sometimes with an always stop controlled intersection, it could be that the stop signs are obscured by adjacent vegetation. And so having something in the middle that both catches attention and requires some sort of lateral movement and corresponding slowing of the vehicle is intended to slow the overall nature of the traffic along the corridor.
Okay. Is there any evidence that a circle slows traffic on the corridor overall, or is it just about improving compliance with the stop sign?
The larger the circle, the more it tends to slow vehicles down. So I could say that with a large intersection and a relatively small circle, that the effects would be slight to modest. When you come across intersections where the circle approaches the size of a true roundabout, the degree of slowing increases substantially. The consideration that we were trying to accommodate is that with the available right-of-way, we still have to accommodate emergency vehicle access. And so in testing the turn templates with some of the large apparatuses, we landed on that particular size of intersection, or size of mini traffic circle, so that it would not obstruct that emergency vehicle access.
So can you qualitatively say whether the circles that are in your proposal are like the small ones that you just said don't have much effect on speed, or like the large ones that do have more effect on speed?
I would say that these are the smaller ones, but when combined with the existing all-way stop control, the slowing effect is okay if modest, because it would improve the degree of compliance with people obeying the existing stop control, for one, and for two, provided that people do make a stop or at least slow down when approaching the intersection, that an extra 1 to 3 mile an hour reduction in their movement through the intersection still affords some benefit to people who are trying to cross the intersection on various means, including walking and biking.
Okay, thanks.
I'm wondering the reason not to do a larger circle, is it because the dimension doesn't fit, or is just want to do it quickly to accommodate, or to accommodate the fact that's already four-way stop?
There are two matters that we want to highlight. One is that we want to construct this as a quick build improvement. And so while there are larger circles that could be accommodating of emergency vehicle access, traditionally that would involve some sort of concrete apron feature like what you would see at a modern roundabout, so that these vehicles could mount them. That's considerably more in terms of funds, essentially. It's much more expensive to pave something like that. And the degree that it's no longer quick build is much more with the larger that feature.
Okay. Just want to also mention the Ling Avenue in El Cerrito. I actually have two similar scale. I don't know how, maybe it's like, what is the dimension that you're proposing for the mini circles? Like 30 feet, 20 feet in diameter?
About 20 to 25 feet diameter.
20 to 25 feet? Yeah, so, I mean, I'm not sure if you need to do it, but on the Ling Avenue in El Cerrito, that cross with Comel and Romano, they have two small ones, but I think they function as kind of a roundabout. Maybe taking a look at it may answer, his question about, the previous question about, like, well, does it actually works? I mean, so some data on that.
I think a big issue with those is they have some trees that are not trimmed up high enough that kind of obscure the whole intersection. But but I don't think that's an issue soon, and that's not an issue with the quick build at all. So, any other questions? All right, so I think we can move on to public comment about this issue.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Knight, 900 block of Santa Fe Avenue. Actually, I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. I didn't realize that horizontal striping on the edge lines was not included in the striping proposal for the blocks that don't have it. Not the 800 block already has it. I think it's really important to have that, because one of the factors in the entire corridor is this perception of a long, uninterrupted stretch of roadway. And if you have, in addition to the narrowing of the lanes, a visual effect as you drive by quickly, that you're moving very fast, which is what those diagonal lines or horizontal lines are intended to create, I think it helps you to feel like you need to slow down. Similarly, the traffic circles, if they have a vertical component to them of vegetation, of planters or some signage or something, also obscure the distant horizon. So it makes it look a little bit less like this long, long stretch of uninterrupted roadway, and might also have a calming effect regardless of what it does at the intersection itself. The 800 block also, I've noticed, has reflector dots, three-dimensional, the protruding reflector dots that serve as kind of mini rumble strips as you're driving along if your wheel ever touches one. I think that would be a great thing, and probably not expensive, to recommend including for other blocks as well, because as soon as you veer a little bit out, you feel that effect on your car. So I think those are my main comments. The other one I had actually sent by email separately was that I think speed tables rather than speed humps make the most sense on our block, because we don't want people slowing way down only to accelerate really hard between the humps to the next one and then slow way down again. That just adds noise and pollution to the situation. We want a sort of constant speed. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Fred Etheridge. I live in the 500 block of Santa Fe between Thousand Oaks and the El Cerrito city line. I wanted to begin by thanking city staff, Justin and Ben, for moving this forward. Our block submitted a petition and letter to the city on June 1st, 2021, 3 years ago, requesting an investigation, so it's good to see it moving forward. The reason we submitted that is speeding is a serious issue on our block, especially if vehicles coming south on Santa Fe from El Cerrito. At the cemetery curve in El Cerrito, it's about half a mile all the way down to Thousand Oaks. And as a result, people fly. There's no stop signs, no traffic restrictions on that in that reach. So that's why we submitted the petition. In terms of the proposed measures, we like the idea of a traffic circle at Thousand Oaks and Santa Fe as proposed. It's really, the way I look at it, it's a second layer of protection. You have an existing four-way stop there, but people blow through that every week. I see, and I'm not talking California stocks where they blow through it. So retaining the existing four-way stop and putting in a traffic circle, I think would give another level of protection. We like that very much and glad to see it. I think you have a good model. We'd like a tree. That was some of our comments, to have it landscape, but I like a tree rather than shrubs. On the way here tonight, I went by Santa Fe and Pomona. You have, I believe it's an island there. It's not a traffic circle, but you have a tree. It's a reddish tree. The lowest branches on that tree are high enough so that as a driver in a vehicle, you have a clear line of sight for pedestrians and cyclists. But it still provides that barrier, which we hope would slow people down. So that would be our suggestion for landscaping there. We very much like the idea, it's also mentioned in the consultant's travel report, of a speed feedback sign. We know there's one on Berkeley, go through the Solano Tunnel, you're on Henry Street, there's one by that Catholic school there. There's two recommended in their parametrics staff report for tonight. We request you to please place one of those speed feedback signs on the west side of Santa Fe, right at the city line. So in other words, if you're coming down Santa Fe in El Cerrito, going southbound, you pass Ward Street, there's a church on that corner, then you hit the creek, which is the city line between Albany and El Cerrito. Right there, the city has an existing sign with the Albany seal on it. We'd put a recommended digital sign there. That's your first chance in Albany to, say, exert traffic control, and we'd very much support that. On the speed hump tables, I got some comments this week from neighbors. They're wondering about the noise that cars may make going over there. They're afraid of people speeding over and going bump, 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 bump. At night, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if the city staff or traffic consultant can look at that, but that was their concern on that. Very much like the idea of striping edge lanes, and this is not within your purview, but it is the police department to please enforce speeding traffic. Thank you.
Thank you.
I live in the 500 block, but I'm actually El Cerrito. And I notice how it's the whole block which is a problem. And there's 5 houses across the street, which are still Albany, but it looks like all the painting, the lines and the things stop at that point where on the western edge, you meet the El Cerrito border. So I don't know if there's any consideration for those 5 additional houses towards the Kensington border, which are already across the street from El Cerrito. I know it's kind of a no man's land, but trying to do what can be done to control the traffic all the way up to Ward Street would be a great thing. But I know then you're talking about 2 counties and 3 cities, so that's just wanted to add that comment.
Thank you. Is there anyone online?
We have one hand raised online. Hold on. Lisa Ho, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm happy to see the traffic calming measures proposed for Santa Fe Avenue. Thank you. I'm particularly interested in the intersection treatment at Washington Avenue. And while I heard the proposal is to allow an emergency vehicle to be able to drive over the intersection treatment, I'd like to request consideration of a circle with plants with vertical height, similar to the intersection at Cornell and Santa Fe, as suggested by a couple of earlier speakers. And specifically, I'm not in favor of the picture that was shown in this presentation on the right side, which was entirely unaesthetic. I would be unhappy with that particular treatment. And a treatment with large plants would not only achieve the traffic calming, breaking up that long spans of Santa Fe, but it has the additional benefit of also transforming a large stretch of hard asphalt cityscape into a feature that enhances the natural beauty and aesthetic of the neighborhood. So I advocate for such measures that achieve multiple benefits and use the funds in a way that achieve multiple things for the neighborhood. Thank you.
No other hands raised.
All right, thank you. Discussion, Commission?
I'll start with the 800 block between Solano and Washington currently has the edge lines with the hatch marks, which I know are not a bike lane, but certainly get used as one. And the reason I mention that is in looking at the difference between speed cushions or speed humps with cut-throughs versus speed tables that are solid across, drivers may move to either hit the channel or avoid the channel, and if they're doing so, they may be moving laterally, and if there's a bike next to them, I think that would be a concern. So I think for that block, I kind of prefer speed tables as the treatment, even if we go back to speed humps on the other blocks. The mini traffic circles, I think, are fine for some of the reasons mentioned about breaking up the long line of sight. The question of whether we're talking about just a mountable apron on them or if the entire circle has to be mountable is, I think, pivotal to whether or not we could have trees. Single slender tree that isn't going to overly obstruct the line of sight, but will break up the long view is fine. I think we want to be really cautious about any ground cover that turns into 5-foot-tall bushes that are going to hide a kid in the crosswalk on the other side. That I think we would not want to do, even with an all-way stop. But otherwise, I think that, yeah, that's pretty much the question of whether we could cross the border. I don't know. Setting up agreements is challenging and probably not really feasible. If we share our plans with jurisdictions across the border and say, hey, we've got a contractor going out there doing work. If you talk to them, maybe they'll do the same thing on your side. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to just contact those agencies and tell them they've got an opportunity, but they're kind of on their own. Maybe that's the best we can do realistically. But it's certainly worth sharing that information with them.
And did reach out to our colleagues, and we did hear the concern about the border. I don't know, did you detail, they have some plans, but it's mainly striping, I think, that they're planning to install on their side. But we can continue to coordinate.
Edge lines are pretty easy. If they pay the striping contractor to just go a little farther.
Just want to add a comment here. I am an urban designer by trade, and then as I see it, actually the only way, or kind of the city, no, one of the major way the city can contribute the overall aesthetics to the city is actually through the right-of-way of the street, right? We don't have a good urban design control or guideline in this city, so the right-of-way become like the major way of doing this. So for that matter, I highly encourage any format of roundabout. And yeah, so that's just additional support.
Commissioner Chomsky?
I guess I'm really not convinced about the circles. I don't see what problem they're trying to solve. I don't really see them as offering a safety or speed benefit compared to the four-way stops we have now. I think they offer an aesthetic benefit and maybe improve the neighborhood. And I think we just have to decide whether that's like is that our priority, or is it really safety and speed? We have a lot of speed surveys showing that speeding is a problem, but I don't know do we have any data about whether cars blowing through stop signs is a problem, or do we just have the anecdotal reports from people who live there and have observed it?
Anecdotally, it's absolutely a problem.
It's primarily anecdotally. We did consult with the police department, who noted the similar issue. So we've heard it both internally as well as from residents.
And is it an issue of people doing the California sort of rolling stop, or people really ignoring the stop sign and blowing through?
We haven't done observations to really count who's doing which.
I guess, to me, the only real safety benefit of the circle is if it prevents people from blowing through. If that's what people are doing, then I'm all in favor of the circle to prevent most people from doing that, or at least make them slow down when they do it. But if people are mostly going through slowly anyway, and the issue is that they didn't come to a complete stop, I don't really see how the circle helps.
So, Commissioner Chomsky, so think about just picturing yourself a circle in the middle of the intersection. If you want to make turn left, without that, you will have all the space you need just to make that left turn, correct? You don't have to stop. But with that circle in it, it effectively reduce the amount of angle. So you need to make the smaller turn so that physically they slow down the traffic.
Yeah, I can see that for the left turns. But again, people making left turns are not usually doing it at over 25 miles an hour. No. If the problem we're dealing with here is speeding.
Right, speeding is...
Speeding is going over 25 miles an hour, and I don't see that these circles have any effect on that problem.
But they will make it harder to travel 25 miles per hour to make that turn. If they
I don't think anybody... I would be shocked if anybody is actually making a left turn at a four-way stop without stopping and continuing to and maintaining a travel speed of over 25 miles an hour as they make the turn. Doesn't seem plausible to me.
In these, this is a fairly wide road. So there's two factors here that I'm thinking of, and one is that and a lot of these comments deal with traffic coming from the north, where they're coming off of Calusa. Calusa is a road with a completely different character. It's all stoplight controlled. It's really quite fast. So people come onto Santa Fe with the same sort of headspace, and they keep going quite quickly. These intersections, because this is wider than most of the streets to the west of the BART, feel very spacious. You've got a lot of sight lines, and people do approach them and pass through them quite quickly. I don't think I've ever experienced anybody completely blowing through the stop sign. I have seen people do quite aggressive left turns coming down the hill, where it's quite a steep hill, and people often just sort of rip through it because they can see the houses are set back quite far. There's not a lot of vegetation on the street at a lot of these street corners, so they can see really well. I admit to going through this whole section at 30 miles an hour on my bike without even touching my brakes, because I felt safe doing that, and it was at night, so you can see everybody's lights from really far off, but. I was in a hurry. I only did it once, but you really can come down. There's a lot of visibility in the neighborhood. So people do feel safe going quite quickly on these streets. I support it as an idea. I think it should be quick build at first. I kind of feel like at least some of these might be better treated and a second phase as like, let's make this an actual roundabout. But that would require like trimming the corners back more, building a bigger mountable circle. Like there's going to be a lot of additional design and expense. But I think this would be an interesting proof of concept. We could even try to separate it into 2 stages with speed, like a speed count before and after. Like you do the table quick build or the hump quick build, do a study, add the circles, do a study, like get some sort of idea. The only problem with that is that the quick build is not going to have the horizontal element to break up the sight line that people can see super far. But again, that wouldn't be true for several years anyway if we added trees. The trees don't grow that fast.
Well, I'm not going to put up a fight about the circles. I'm skeptical, but I don't feel the need to deviate from the group majority opinion, which is clearly in favor of them.
I just want to acknowledge that I accept that they may not have much impact to traffic speed in the intersection, except in the cases you're talking about where someone is blowing the stop sign at something over 5 miles an hour. But I think the real benefit to them is changing the character of the street. The visual aesthetic, the character of as you're driving through, it's like, oh, this is not a wide open street. I think you'll actually see people slowing down more as they approach the stop sign, regardless what they do at the stop sign and in the intersection. So that, to me, is where really the bigger benefit comes through. It's just people getting a different space in their head of what they're seeing and how they react to the environment around them. It just changes the street character. And I think it complements the speed humps or speed tables by having a more comprehensive traffic calming. So as tempting as it is for someone who likes statistics to do before and after studies piece by piece, I kind of feel like we should just go ahead and do the whole thing. But you're absolutely right. We should do it as a quick build. This is not the time to pop trees in there until we feel like, all right, we got something pretty solid here. Maybe it's just, the signpost in the middle to provide that vertical element of conspicuity. And then at some point later, we can come back and upgrade to trees, which I think would be nice to have.
Is there any way to do a study on stop sign compliance on these streets? Can we like slap a camera up for a couple months and see whether people are doing it?
Yeah, I mean, a couple months is probably more than we would want to pay someone to count, but you can do 24-hour, you can do a couple-day kind of video observation.
Yeah, I would say let's just, the first question before after the consultant talking about all the improvement, I was like, oh, the price is significantly lower than I know of. And thanks for Justin for explanation, because they're a couple of items bundled together, right? That brings down the cost significantly. So let's just use that, right? Don't break it into different phases. Let's just get it down, save some money, and see some results. I think that's better than, let's do some study, do it again. I want to see it in my lifetime.
These things aren't free?
Right.
So what are we trying to do in this meeting? Is our goal to just give a general positive report and say we support the conceptual plans and go ahead with a more detailed design, or are we trying to actually make specific decisions about which elements to include? And
well, I think recommendations for which elements to include, like for example, were you watching outside?
No.
Okay, so the recommendation there was to do the plan as planned, but break off for separate consideration the idea of a scramble period for Marin and Santa Fe, because there were concerns from various commissioners about whether it was the right thing to do, or it maybe just requires more careful design if we were going to go forward with it. So this would be the point to say, like, maybe we don't want the circles if we are all strongly against the circles.
Well, at that broad level, yes, but in terms of decisions like should the edge lines have crosshatches or not? Are we getting into that level of detail now, or is that for a future meeting?
I mean, we could ask Mr. Lee why they were omitted from the plan, or
As best I can recall, the edge lines were sometimes misinterpreted as parking stall markings.
see, to me, they look like no parking markings. They do, I mean, I can see that they could cause some confusion.
The current block installation caused some confusion because one side is a dashed line that lines up exactly with the diagonal. So each diagonal has a dash at the end, which makes it look like parking Ts. So that's not a fatal flaw. We could do it solid lines or not line them up so that that issue, it could be clear either way.
Okay. So
As I recall, it was installed as sort of a soft traffic calming. Now we're putting like real devices out there, so I don't feel as much of a need for us to try to replicate it. I wouldn't necessarily remove it from that one block, but
we don't have speed humps on every block. So on some blocks, the edge lines are our main weapon, right?
It's just the one block between Thousand Oaks and Portland.
Is that the only one that doesn't have it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything else has at least one.
Just to be clear, the design that we presented has the edge lines. It was just the comment noted that the diagonal hatching is not within the current proposal.
What about the suggestion of reflector dots? Is that
I think
if I could ask just a quick clarification on the reflector dots, and maybe we can get some feedback on that. Is that on the center line or on the edge lines?
The 800 block.
Yeah.
I believe it's on the center.
Yeah, okay. That's good, because I don't remember it being on the edge lines, and I wouldn't want it on the edge lines since that's closer where bikes would ride. And
okay?
Okay, perfect.
In the center,
Yeah,
so
so
nobody
standard,
can hear.
what traffic engineers would call detail 22 center line with those would be great to have.
Okay. And let's see, so does the design include a speed feedback sign for southbound cars upon first entering Albany? That was something that was requested.
Placement of the speed feedback sign is not shown in the plans, and so we can incorporate that comment to
Okay,
one
great.
there.
Let's see. And then there were actually a lot of detailed comments in an email from Ken Jung. I don't know if you guys addressed some of those in your earlier meeting, but those were, I thought, worthy of careful attention because they clearly had some engineering kind of thought behind them. That was an email yesterday, so he had a numbered list of 7 items. So let's see, his first comment.
Check my spams.
His first comment was essentially to propose speed tables rather than humps because the goal is to limit speeds to 25, not to try to force people to slow down significantly below that. His second comment was a staged approach to building different kinds of speed tables or humps at different heights out of temporary materials to see how effective they are, but I don't know if that's practical. Like to put a temporary hump in place and see what its effect is before pouring the asphalt for the permanent one. Is that something that can be done, or?
There are quick build like rubber materials that can be used for speed humps, and they come prefabricated, so they tend to come in a standard height and width.
So there's not really much opportunity to experiment with different heights or and if they're humps, that's probably not what we're. I think his suggestion was to start with the minimum disruption, which would be something more like a table, and then if that wasn't severe enough to switch to a hump. But it sounds like there's nothing like a table that would be temporary.
Temporary tables, I don't think I've seen them for vehicles because a much longer, wider feature and anything short of asphalt tend to get beat up pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Then he had a couple of comments about the Santa Fe and Marin intersection, but that was, I guess, part of the other discussion. He recommended leading pedestrian intervals at the Solano intersection. Is that something that's come up at all? Is there any talk about changing that signal?
Hasn't come up tonight. It is an old signal. It's probably requires upgrades before we could add that in.
So that would be a different
It's one of our
project.
older signals, yeah.
Okay, good. And then, his final comment was sort of the trigger for all of my questions about the circles. He said, what is the problem that needs to be solved at these intersections, and do traffic circles address the problem? So I think I've beaten that horse to death already. So that covers everything from his message. And I think that was the end of my specific comments. So thank you.
I do agree with his philosophy about trying to get the vehicles to 25 for a consistent speed. The speed tables do that, that's great. I have some limited experience with bolt-down speed tables, speed humps, speed cushions, things like that the city of Berkeley had done experiments with, mostly predating my time, and I kind of got to see the after effect of it. One of the key elements to that is they don't perform the same way as asphalt, because you've got sort of a hard edge that vehicles hit. You can't taper it down to zero thickness like you can with the asphalt, which basically you grind into the existing asphalt so you can get something stable. So I think we might as well just go ahead and build them out of asphalt the way we want them, and then sort of get the advice on should they be 3.5 inches tall, 3 inches, 4 inches, what height gets us to 25, and the precision of construction is never going to be exactly what you want, but we go with what theoretically gets us there.
Are we all pretty much agreed on preferring tables over humps where possible?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think then kind of what we have recommended to us is the edge lines, which I think we're in agreement edge lines are good. Speed tables rather than speed humps. Mini circles definitely seem worth doing as quick builds, and that I certainly like the idea of a speed feedback sign aimed at southbound traffic entering the city. So if those are the key elements that staff wanted recommendations on, I would move those.
Sounds good.
Is that a motion? Yes. I'll second that.
Okay.
Was that clear, or do you want me to restate it?
Can I just note that you were kind of noodling around specific on edge lines, and just curious if you had ideas as a commission on what those edge lines specifically looked like?
I think that the edge lines on the 800 block have been effective. And the idea of the hatching there was to keep the parked cars from getting right up to the edge line and leaving a little more space for bikes. So that's positive. Whether the width of the street changes as we go to the other blocks, I don't know that I don't think it does. So yeah, I'm open to feedback from other commissioners. Having ridden that for many years, I quite enjoyed riding along that section, even if I didn't ride it the way that we would advise people to do in terms of staying out of the door zone. I just see it as a low turnover parking area, and I really close eye on the cars to see if anyone's opening doors, but That said, it's not really ideal design, but I do think that it did what it was intended to do. Mostly.
It works for me.
All right, so do we have,
So does that,
is that
do you
clear
want
enough?
some of
for
that wording in the motion, or is that?
Just making sure we were capturing everything.
Okay.
Basically the same thing as last time, like recommend it, but with a preference for tables.
So do we need a motion that goes into these details, or can we say as a motion that we support the plan as, the conceptual plan as proposed with specific comments as were discussed at the meeting?
The latter suffices. The plan, these elements are in the plan. Where you're deviating from that or wanting to specify, the comments suffice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to say that the motion is to include edge lines with hatching where feasible, to use speed tables in the locations indicated, and to use quick build mini circles as indicated in the plans, and to incorporate a speed feedback sign for southbound traffic coming into Albany from the city limits. And include detail 22 center lines with reflector dots.
That was seconded.
Roll call.
Commissioner Chomsky.
Yes.
Commissioner Javindal.
Aye.
Commissioner Peng.
Yes.
Chair V. Hilma-Kleinahan.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right.
Call back our other commissioners if they're in earshot.
So it's just out of concern for time, how long do you expect 5-2 to take? Because we've got 25 minutes left in the regular meeting.
At the pleasure of the commission, I can run through it pretty quickly. It's more just a review of past to tee up our upcoming discussions, so I can start relatively brief and.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to be sensitive to everybody's needs to, you know. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair, in the process of listening to the second half of that item, I realized there are a couple of details that we didn't address specifically in the first half. I beg your indulgence to reopen the first half.
Sure. What in specific?
I don't know, I'm not supposed to talk about it until Harry.
Oh, until Harry leaves, okay.
And we just lost another commissioner. So I don't think we specifically addressed.
We'll have our four. So I move that we reopen the south end of the Santa Fe traffic calming item.
Seconded. Is 4 a quorum?
Where's a quorum? Yeah. Roll call.
Can we just raise our hands if we agree?
Unanimous.
So the specific items were center dots and edge striping. And I was listening to the discussion of the edge striping. By the way, it takes a while for us to get back because my phone was delayed 20 seconds. So just be aware. So having resided on the example block, but not speaking to it as a changing thing, the diagonal striping, I think, is effective at adding something that does not continue seamlessly for the entire block. It was intended to be parallel lines with striping, but I would be open to any sort of striping, and I'm also in favor of the center dots. With double glazed windows, it's not a sound issue.
Right, so the changes are to make sure that the center lines include the detail 22 with the reflective pavement markers down the center line. And the edge lines can also include the diagonal markings keep the parking hopefully set back. Correct? Okay. I would be happy to move that we add those comments to our first motion.
And I will also second that addition, if that's appropriate.
Roll call? Or did you hear everything, Michael? Okay.
No, okay. He didn't hear.
Okay.
4 is a quorum.
Yes. So
Try.
detail 22 center lines with raised pavement markers for the center line. And that we would like the edge lines to include the diagonal hash marks where feasible.
Now we're talking about this.
This is to add to
the southern bit
yeah.
again.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
From Marin South to incorporate the same treatments that we recommended for north.
Okay, gotcha, that makes sense.
Motion and a second. Anyone wish to speak on this item? No hands raised. Commissioner Barnes.
Yes.
Commissioner Javendel. Aye. Commissioner McCroskey.
Yes.
Commissioner Peng.
Yes.
Chair Vigil McClanahan.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Thank you all.
All right.
To get Harry back. There we go. Thank you for indulging us.
Got to get in my 10,000 steps today.
All right, so this item is a bit of a looking back as staff's gotten prepared for the preparation of new active transportation plan, been reviewing some of the prior projects and over the last dozen years, and thought it would be interesting for the commission to share it with the commission as well. Some of the commissioners have longer history here and have more experience with some of these projects that predate my time here. So with that, I'll just run through. The staff memo had basically a list, so this is the visual component of that. I'm going to just go through year by year and look at how we've stitched together the plan implementation. So that previous slide was the facilities envisioned in the 2012 active transportation plan. Prior to 2012 start, had some facilities in place. The Albany Greenway had just been redone, I believe, just a year or so before. Bay Trail, the Marin Avenue bike lanes with the road diet, and some pedestrian and shared use paths in the city. In 2012, Pierce Street Path Segment 1 was completed on the northern section of Pierce Street. In 2013, Masonic Avenue signage and striping was installed, and the Marin Santa Fe Safe Routes to Schools project that did some of the intersection improvements that we were discussing earlier. 2014, the Marin and Curtis intersection improvements were completed, and the Buchanan Street Bikeway, and that also included some Jackson Safe Routes to Crossing and signal improvements at Jackson and improvements at the Pierce signal as well. 2015, the Cerrito Creek Pathway adjacent to Pierce Street was installed, and the traffic calming policy was updated. In 2016, first round of the ATP signage and striping, that was the citywide on-street facilities, was installed. These were installed over several years of projects, so this was the first tranche of those. 2017, the construction of the Sprout Shopping Center was completed, which installed the Dartmouth pedestrian beacon, the Monroe signal improvements, the cycle track along San Pablo, and the Cornices Creek path from San Pablo to 10th. 2018, the Marin Undergrounding and Bikeway Phase 3 project closed the bike lane gap between Cornell and San Pablo Avenue. 2019, additional signage and striping was installed, and the Solano Avenue Complete Street Study went in, as well as a lot of the ATP bicycle route wayfinding. 2020, the Albany Beach Bay Trail improvement completed. Washington Avenue access and traffic calming, including the pedestrian crossing to Catherine's Walk, the raised crosswalk there. Access improvements at the end of Taft to access Albany Hill, and the Talbot rapid rectangular flashing beacon at Talbot and Marin. 2021, the traffic calming policy was updated, and I didn't identify all of these, but lower Solano curb ramps were installed through several blocks along Solano Avenue east from San Pablo Avenue. 2022 installed more of the active transportation plan on street signage and striping. 2023, the Keynes and Adams Bikeway pilot was installed. Marin Avenue pavement project phase 1, improving the bike lanes between Cornell and Key Route. We completed the local road safety plan and updated the intersection red curb policy. And so far this year, we've completed the Ohlone Greenway signalized intersection improvements at Solano and at Marin, and completed the Cornices Creek path between 8th and 10th. The street lighting evaluation and guidelines were approved, and we conducted the Keynes and Adams Bikeway pilot evaluation. Putting all those together, the map looks very different than it did in 2012. Additional to those, we have programmatic projects. The sidewalk shaving program has gone 5 zones, should be completed in 2025, covering all the zones within the city. Sidewalk repair program, as you've seen with presentations on this, has tackled over 400 locations, so across 8 phases. Traffic calming program, we've had installation at 18 blocks or intersections between 2016 and 2023, and intersection daylighting red curb. We've completed a number of prioritized locations to date and are working towards programmatic implementation citywide on that. And currently under construction along San Pablo Avenue are crossing enhancements north of Washington, as well as the phase 1 of the Jackson Street Bikeway adjacent to the graduate student housing in UC Village. And in design, coordinating with Alameda CTC on other crossing improvements along San Pablo Avenue that were scoped as our phase 2 San Pablo improvements. Also the parallel bike route project that Alameda CTC is leading has improvements at Keynes and Solano and Keynes and Marin. Marin Avenue pavement phase 2 is in design. Cleveland Avenue, you've seen concepts for, that's in design as well. That will complete another segment of the Pierce Street to Cleveland bike path, and the Jackson Street Bikeway phase 2 is also in design. And they're back in the queue, and conceptual designs have been prepared and reviewed by the commission for Brighton, for Key Route, and what was the San Pablo and Buchanan Complete Streets project phase 3. That's the Buchanan intersections. We have concepts for a number of intersection improvements along Buchanan as well. And in planning, the commission has recently discussed Keynes and Adams with the evaluation, sort of the next design for that and intersection improvements, as well as we're about to start on Pierce Street segment 2 path through Pierce Street Park. I'll get to that in announcements, but the council recently appropriated some funding towards initial design and grading planning work for that to scope out that project. With that, I'll open it up.
A lot.
That was our comment to staff. Wow.
Like a time warp. It's
But it also kind of underlines that when we make these plans, they're not just pieces of paper. They actually do. It sometimes feels like we come up with these ideas and nothing happens and nothing happens and nothing happens, but something does happen. It may take 5 years, it may even take 10 years, but this shows real progress.
I feel like in the upcoming ATC kind of update, what you just did, maybe we can ask the consultant to make a like visually really appeasing kind of exhibit of what we did for the past 12 years, and as a public outreach, so the people know what Albany has gone through and what are the changes. That may help us building some consensus moving forward.
I know this is the question period, but it seems only appropriate to thank staff, current and former, my current and former colleagues on the commission, and all of the work of consultants that's been put in. It is something to look at as a piece. Thank you.
I will also veer into comments. First off, thanks, great presentation. That was a huge amount of stuff just to assemble into a slideshow, let alone to have done. And mirroring Ken's comments that, yeah, a lot of us have sat on this side of the table and made comments and suggestions over the years, and members of the public have been super engaged and bringing forth things that have come to fruition. But staff has been amazing. You know, and in my time, and I'm terrible with remembering names, so I'll probably forget half of them, but you know, from Ann Cheney, who was here when I started, Jeff Bond, who has been engaged through much of this, Cherry Chaitarn, Aleda, Andrina Chavez, and yourselves. This is a huge transformation to the city, just constantly chipping away, and every one of these little lines or dots or whatever was a lot of effort, a lot of outreach, a lot of conversations, a lot of hard work. And I just want to say it's impressive and transformative. And when I started paying attention to, you know, Albany transportation needs in like 1998, a lot of these were, you know, kind of far-fetched, you know, imaginary. Oh, we'll never get there. We've done so many of those things and gone beyond. And it's again, thanks to everyone in the community and to staff, and it's really impressive to see. So I just want to acknowledge the amazing work you've done and the great way you've presented it. I think that just, you know, that in itself is really something that I appreciate, because it showed so much in such a quick and clear way.
If I can add, I think we'd be remiss not to mention the implementation side, which is supported by the Public Works Department and the various administrations and people and engineers who have come through that department and their support.
So let's do more.
Yes.
I would concur. It would be nice if the citizenry in Albany had a better sense of how much progress there has been. You know, you move here and it's like, yeah, it must have been like this forever, and it wasn't.
How many people remember the train tracks where the Albany Greenway is now, right? Just assume that's always been there, and it wasn't.
I remember that freeway on-ramp or off-ramp in your neighborhood when I first moved here.
moved here 2 years ago. This has always been like this.
That's valid too.
Do we have any more formal questions, or should we give anybody? They're going to be online.
There are a couple people online. If you would like to speak on this item, raise your hand. Not seeing hand raised.
All right. We can go forward to further discussion or laudatory comment sort of thing. I'm looking forward to recusing myself for the Brighton traffic calming. One day. All right. Do we need a motion, or are we just be done? Okay. All right. Do you have any announcements?
Just updates for you tonight. On June 3rd, Council authorized a contract with Parametrics for preparation of the active transportation plan.
Bad timing.
You almost got away.
On June 17th, Council authorized a design contract for Marin Avenue Phase 2 to incorporate signal and lighting improvements and prepare a finalized bid package for that project. And I already mentioned this, appropriated some funding for conceptual design grading plan for the Pierce-Cleveland bikeway connection. And was also going to note upcoming on Monday, the annual sidewalk rehabilitation project, Phase 9, that you saw previously, is going to council. And just mention that a lot of Ben's work over the last few weeks, we submitted a active transportation program grant for Keynes and Adams that went into the state program last week. So was a big lift. And those are my announcements.
All right. Does anybody have any future agenda items they'd like to get on there? Are there... So, would it be possible to get an update on like what the street lighting situation is going to look like going forward? And I didn't remember any timelines for implementation. I knew that like once it had been approved that they were going to start, updating the street lights, but I have no sense of that progress.
We will work on getting.
Obviously not urgent, but it'd be interesting to know what the going forward looks like. All right, we have another meeting, July 25th. See y'all then.